What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Fairweather Fan Podcast. My name is Anthony Corby, and on today's episode, I'm going to be going over the Sixers trade deadline moves. I'm going to talk a little bit about how optimistic I am about the Phillies' playoff chances this season, and then the travesty that is the Philadelphia Eagles. What the hell happened today? What did they do? What did they try to do? Why should we now expect or want Howie Roseman to be fired even more so than we did before today? But first things first, the trade deadline. Philadelphia 76ers. Did they make the right moves at this year's trade deadline? And the answer to that question is yes. They didn't give up too much, and they wound up basically doing exactly what I said they should a couple of weeks ago, solidifying their depth off the bench. I wanted them to get J.J. Redick. I thought that would have been great if they got J.J. Redick. But getting George Hill, that's still a pretty big upgrade. I mean, to have somebody come off the bench. I mean, Tony Bradley, a lot of people are a bit sad that Tony Bradley is going to be going. However, when Embiid comes back, Tony Bradley's playing time is going to go back down again. I mean, he was kind of in that third tier category. He was coming off the deep end of the bench. And even though he played a few good games, especially that last one that he played for the Sixers, you're not really giving up too much by losing Tony Bradley. And the other night definitely increases trade value. I don't think they would have, before the other night, before that Warriors game, I don't think the Thunder would have traded just for Bradley and the picks that they sent over. But that I think that definitely increases trade value. Showed he has potential. And I think the Thunder, I don't think there's like a team that you can say won or lost this trade. I think both teams won this trade. The Thunder, they got a nice young center. And then the Sixers, they got a great shooter who adds depth to their bench and didn't cost that much at all. A lot of people, well, some people I should say, these people are definitely in the minority. People that think the Sixers should have done more. They should have traded for Lowry, even if they gave up Matisse. They should have traded for Lonzo, even if they gave up Danny Green, Mike Scott, or somebody else. They did all they could. And here's the comparison. Daryl Morey, I think, really had discipline. To put it in one word, he had discipline. He wasn't gonna wind up forfeiting Matisse, forfeiting who's the other guy there? Oh, Maxey. He wasn't going to forfeit all these guys for Kyle Lowry because the question was, is he a rental? Is he just a one-year guy? And the Heat didn't want to go in, and that's why, the Raptors wound up losing this trade deadline. They were asking way too much for Lowry. And then the Pelicans wound up losing this trade deadline too because they didn't get rid of Lonzo and get something in return for him. So the comparison that I'll make is to Barcelona, FC Barcelona. They are in massive debt right now. If you've been following along with, what's going on with La Liga and all that, FC Barcelona are in massive debt. And that's not, they have, I think, I might be wrong about this, I think they have $1 billion in debt, and they have $1 billion in expenses, and $1 billion that are coming in profit in the next year. Somewhere around that. And the reason they're in so much debt is because they keep overpaying for players. They went into a meeting thinking, okay, we're not going to offer more than $90 million or 90 million euros for this guy from, I forget who it was, but somebody from another league, and they went into the meeting saying, okay, we're not giving up more than 90 million euro for this guy, and they wound up paying 145 million or somewhere around there, 140 to 145 million. 50 million euro increase. The Sixers didn't want to do that. They didn't want to wind up being like Barcelona. I don't even know if Daryl Morey even knows about the Barcelona case. He probably does. But, the good thing about having Daryl Morey as your GM is he's not going to make a stupid move like that. Elton Brand would have given up Matisse in a heartbeat. And then he would have gone and won a title somewhere. He would have been Defensive Player of the Year, and he would have won a title somewhere. Kind of like the old management for all Philly sports teams used to do. Remember how the Flyers traded away Carter Richards and Gagne to the Kings, and they literally won the cup that year? I mean, that's why it's good to be a Sixers fan, in my opinion. And or at least that's why I appreciate Daryl Morey for not giving up too much. They still have Matisse, they still have Maxey, they still have Green, they still have Seth. I thought they were going to make a deadline move for Kelly Oubre after it was announced that Lowry and Lonzo were staying. So it was kind of an anticlimactic end. We expected that they would make another move. It was like, okay, they just gave up Tony Bradley, but they still have Green's contract. They still have Matisse, Maxey, and Seth on hand to trade. Probably not Seth. His name has kind of been removed from trade conversations in the last week. But they still had these assets. They could still give them up. Raptors made a huge mistake by keeping Lowry, because now they have to pay him for the rest of the season, and they're not making the playoffs. And he's going to start games, and he's going to win games for them that they otherwise wouldn't have won. And so they're going to lose draft positions as a result. So, Raptors lost his trade deadline. I made a tweet, let's see if I can find it, about the winners and losers of this year's trade deadline. And I originally, kind of just talked about the big winners and the big losers. But then I kind of broke it down a little bit more. Let's see if I can find it here. Of course, I tweeted so much about the Flyers last night, we're not even going to talk about the Flyers. Here we go, the big winners of this year's trade deadline. The Nuggets, they got JaVale McGee and Aaron Gordon. The Blazers, they got Norman Powell. And the Heat, who gave up pretty much nothing for Victor Oladipo. Sorry. And then the small winners, the guys that still won, but not as significantly as the Nuggets, Blazers, and Heat. I would say the Sixers, they added to the bench depth, which is exactly what they needed to do, and they didn't give up that much. The Celtics, I would say the Celtics, I forget who they got. They got Evan Fournier. And so, they definitely added a key piece. They now have a greater chance to get out of that play-in tournament. And then the Mavericks, because the Mavericks got J.J. Redick, and he's a great shooter. And I think the Mavericks, kind of the expectation for the Mavericks now is that you've been rebuilding for all these years. And so, it's finally time that you guys have to make the playoffs. And they're 7th in the race right now. They've won 7 out of their last 10. And so, adding J.J. Redick, he's probably going to come off the bench. But that's a big addition for the Mavericks. That can definitely help them get out of that play-in tournament. I don't think they will. I think the 6 teams above them are pretty much locked in place, especially after the deals yesterday. I mean, the Nuggets and Blazers, I feel like, are going to be winning a lot more than they already are right now. Lakers might slip out of the top 6. I mean, I guess we'll see. There's still 3.5 games up on Dallas. I think if any team drops out, it's gonna wind up being the Lakers, just because they don't have AD for how many more weeks now? 1 or 2, maybe more, and then they don't have LeBron for 6 to 8. So then they've lost 4 straight, including last night's loss to the Sixers. Let's go. Clippers, I don't see dropping. They're gonna keep winning. Suns, Jazz. Yeah, so if the Mavericks are going to pass anybody, it's going to be the Lakers. The key thing, I think, is just getting through that play-in tournament and then seeing where you go from there in the playoffs. And they're probably going to wind up, if they hold on to the 7th seed, which I think they will, they're probably going to wind up playing either the Clippers or the Suns, unless the Jazz go on like a bad losing streak sometime in the next few weeks and months. And then the small losers. I would say I only put one team in this category, and that's the Brooklyn Nets for not getting J.J. Redick. And there was a lot of hype about, he would get bought out by the Pelicans, and then the Nets would be the favorites to sign him. And they didn't get J.J. Redick, so I would put them as small losers. They didn't make any other moves, at least not any major ones. They obviously, they got James Harden months ago, so they've definitely made some of the best trades this season, or the best trade this season to get him, because now they have that big three, and then they also have a ton of depth, but adding J.J. Redick, that would have really enhanced their depth, but they didn't get him, and so if they wind up losing a couple of games in the playoffs because they lack shooting on a given night, they're going to regret that. I remember J.J. Redick for the Sixers. That guy, when all else failed, J.J. Redick, you could at least count on to hit some key threes when you needed them and we would win games that way. And then the big losers, Raptors and Pelicans, without question, they didn't get rid of the guys that they thought they were going to get rid of. And, they should have anyway. I mean, the Raptors, I would say, are the biggest loser because they could have had, they could have had Maxey. They could have had Mike Scott. And then 2 firsts. The Sixers were willing to give up 2 firsts. They weren't willing to give up Matisse. That was the only thing. But they could have had Maxey. They could have had Mike Scott. They might have even been able to convince the Sixers to get rid of Danny Green. I mean, apparently Danny Green's agent was telling him that, he should expect to be traded before the deadline, and they wound up not getting traded. And I'm glad they didn't, because he really saved the Sixers last night. He was definitely their player of the game, and the Sixers are now 2 games up in the East as a result. But the Raptors, they failed by not getting rid of Lowry. And now they've got to pay him for the rest of the season. And they're going to win games with him. And whatever rebuild they were trying to accomplish, they were basically clearing everybody else out. Norman Powell left, but now they've still got Lowry. So they're not going to drop as much in the standings as I think ownership would want them to. And so they're not going to have as good of a chance at that, number 1 overall pick or even a top 3 pick. And then I said the Rockets, because they gave up Oladipo for nothing. The Heat had so many assets that they could have given up. I know they didn't want to give up Tyler Hero, but they didn't even get Duncan Robinson in return, the Rockets. I mean, they got, basically the Heat got Oladipo for Avery Bradley, Kelly Flop-Linick. I call him Flop-Linick because that's pretty accurate based on, how he plays. I mean, if you watch that NBA playoff series between the Sixers and Heat a few years ago, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And then they got rid of, I think, either a 2022 second, or I think they actually swapped draft picks in the second round or something like that. And then I would also put the Clippers on this list, because I don't get the hype around Rajon Rondo. I'm sorry, but he has, look, I'm going to get the exact stats up, but he has somewhere around like 4 points per game this season, 3.9 points per game. I guess they're hoping they can activate him, but Lou Williams, really? He's averaging 12.1 points per game. And you're really going to give him up for Rajon Rondo? They're basically the same age. Lou Williams is just, he's a lot better of a player right now than Rajon Rondo is. I don't know why they gave him up. I mean, his field goal percentage is pretty low. Lou Williams. But I mean, so is Rajon Rondo. Like, Lou Williams is so much better than Rondo in like every category. I mean, rebounds, he has a slight edge. Assists, he's like slightly down, but it's like a tenth of 1 assist per game. He's ahead in steals, even in blocks. 3-point percentage is exactly even. Field goal percentage goes to Williams. Points per game goes to Williams. Minutes per game goes to Williams. Now all of a sudden you're going to expect Rajon Rondo to play. I mean, I guess like there's not that big of a difference, but still, like the amount of minutes that Lou Williams had compared to Rondo, like was with that basically, it just doesn't line up. The ratio doesn't line up. And so I think it's a really dumb move by the Clippers to go after Rajon Rondo and give up Lou Williams in the process. And Lou Williams didn't want to leave, by the way. He said he would retire. I haven't heard anything today, but I guess we'll see if he actually retires or if he like actually goes to play for Atlanta. But anyway, just kind of in conclusion, I said that in the last podcast, I said they should give up Bradley for 2 players, which they kind of did. I was okay with the trade because it wasn't like, they were trading Bradley and then Green. They were just trading Bradley and then Ferguson. So I thought that was a really good trade by Daryl Morey. I also said the lower end of the bench, they were pretty much free, and they wound up shedding 2 of the guys who I thought they might, Terrence Ferguson and Vincent Poirier. Ferguson's obviously easy to part with, as well as the second-round picks that they gave up. That was a 3-team trade, so they actually got Iggy Brazdeikis as well from the New York Knicks. He's basically going to be another, last guy on the bench kind of guy. He's kind of replacing, I guess, Poirier and Ferguson in a sense. But it's still worth it, even with that, losing 2 players off that end for 1 player, but you add depth in kind of the middle of the bench, or, front of the bench, actually. George Hill's probably going to be their new 6th man, kind of replacing Shake Milton. But Shake Milton's still going to play. It's more like Hill will be replacing Shake Milton, and Milton will be replacing Furkan Korkmaz in terms of minutes. So if Hill is somewhat good, and the draft picks wind up being somewhat busts, I would say this is a really good trade for the Sixers. If those draft picks wind up becoming like the next LeBron James or something like that, then they've probably lost the trade, but they're second-round picks. So, I mean, it's completely understandable. Sixers, they want to win a championship. They're going to do what they have to do to win this championship. Anyway, moving on now. Let's talk about the Philadelphia Phillies. So like I said before, I think that the Phillies are a 5th seed wildcard team at best, and I think that's kind of the general consensus with the Phillies fan base. So how optimistic am I about the Phillies' chances to even get in the playoffs this season? Like I said, I think they have to rely on the Braves or Mets not meeting their potential. And I think with the Mets, it's more likely because the Mets have not gotten up to their potential in the last few years as well. So, if the Mets wind up not meeting their potential, whether it's because they just aren't as good as people thought they would be, or it's because they have a ton of injuries, and a ton of key injuries, and they wind up not being as good as a result. But that's the first thing. They've got to rely on the Braves or Mets not meeting their potential. That's the only way they get that second spot, because the first wildcard team is going to be the Padres. So it's going to be about the second wildcard spot. So the second team in the division in the NL East is probably going to be the one that makes the playoffs. The Central is really weak. Aside from the Cardinals and maybe the Cubs, I guess, like, who else is going to make the playoffs from the NL Central? So, the Phillies have to beat the Mets. That should be their goal. Because even with injuries, I think the Braves are going to win the division. Even if they have a few key injuries, they're still going to get them back. They're still going to win the division. So your goal has to be ahead of the Mets all season. And to do this, what you have to do on the field is your bullpen has to perform. They haven't in years past, but now they've upgraded their bullpen. They've brought in guys like Tony Watson and Jose Alvarado, who are supposed to be kind of these Alvarado's kind of a veteran pitcher, not really. Tony Watson is a veteran pitcher. So you've made this upgrade, and then on the hitting side, your offense has to be consistent. And the hitting has been really inconsistent the last few years. Even when they brought in Charlie Manuel to fix the problem, they were still not hitting consistently as well as they should have. There were definitely a few one-run games that they put up. Leaving the bases loaded, grounding into a ton of double plays, that sort of thing. You can't do as much of that this season as you did in the last few seasons. And that should be obvious, but that's kind of the key for the Phillies to even have a chance to begin with. And the main thing I'm worried about now is that their starting pitching has faltered in spring training. And I'm not talking about last night. That wasn't really, those guys that pitched last night weren't really their quote-unquote starters. I mean, I was a little concerned about Alvarado giving up a couple runs. But I'm mainly concerned about Nola and Wheeler giving up a lot of runs in at least one game apiece. I mean, the other night, Wheeler gave up, I think it was 7 runs in one inning. Nola's ERA is somewhere around 6 for spring training. Wheeler's is, I think, 6 or 7. You just hope that this isn't kind of a precursor to the season. Tyler Glasnow, a couple of years ago in 2019, he, in spring training, he was pretty bad. He was trying something different with his pitching, but then they got to the regular season, and the Rays wound up, he was their top pitcher until he got injured and was out for most of the season. But he could have been he was a Cy Young candidate for the Rays in the 2019 season. And so you just hope, if you're a Phillies fan, that it'll be a similar story, minus the injury part with Nola and Wheeler. That they're just not playing well in spring training, but when we get to the regular season, it'll be fine. And so if they get in that 5th seeded wild card spot, your path to the World Series is to play all of the teams that traditionally have choked. And to do that, first of all, you have to beat the Padres, who aren't really a traditional choking team, but will probably be in the playoffs this season and will probably be in the wild card round. And you're going to have to find a way to beat them, whether, and they have experience now in the playoffs because of that tournament last year. So you can't even say inexperience might play a factor. But they have to upset the Padres in that wild card game somehow. The same way that the Nationals upset the Brewers in 2019. That should be your starting point. You have to upset the Padres, and then you just have to hope that your next matchups line up so they're easily choking matchups. And to do that, you have to have pretty much the same thing that you had in the National League race that the Nationals had. You have to go up against the Dodgers, who normally choke in the postseason, and then you have to go up against the Braves. I don't think they went up against the Cardinals, who beat the choking Braves in 2019. So you have to beat the Dodgers, hope that they choke again, and then you have to go and hope that the Braves choke again in the NLCS, or that the Cardinals upset them again, and then the Cardinals do what they did in the NLCS and also in 2019. And then you have to hope your World Series matchup is either with an inexperienced White Sox or Blue Jays team, or an injured Yankees team. Somehow an injured Yankees team. And so here are my predictions. I'm gonna lay out my predictions right now for what I think is gonna happen in the playoffs. I think that I'll give you the seeds first. In the National League, I think Dodgers are the 1 seed, Braves are the 2 seed, Cardinals 3, Padres 4, Phillies 5. Phillies or Mets 5. I'm being optimistic by putting the Phillies 5th, but if I were to make this without bias, I would say the Mets in 5th. And so you've got to hope that the Cardinals upset the Braves in the NLCS, and then hope that they did what they did in 2019, or hope that you wind up, you beat the Padres, you play the 1st-seeded Dodgers, you go to the NLCS, you play the 2-seeded Braves, and hope that they choke. But in the American League, I think the American League is pretty weak this year, to be completely honest. I think a lot of the good pitching and hitting is over in the National League. I think that the Yankees are the clear front runners, even if they wind up having a ton of injuries. But a lot of the good pitching is in LA and San Diego. And a lot of the teams that they've gotten pitching from have been American League teams. So I don't even think the Astros are going to make the playoffs this season after losing Springer and Brantley. I've got the Yankees winning the AL East and being the 1st seed. White Sox winning the AL Central as a 2nd seed, even though they just lost Eloy Jimenez. I think they still have a pretty stacked team. They'll still be able to go on a playoff run, to make the playoffs first of all, and then to go on a run when they get there. I've got the Athletics as a 3rd seed, and then I've got the Twins as the 4th seed and the Rays as a 5th seed. And so in the wild card round, that's pretty much anybody's guess. There have been upsets in the wild card round before. In the league division series, I would say that the Dodgers beat the Padres, the Braves beat the Cardinals, because I think that the Padres are actually going to win that wild card round no matter what. Even if they play if they play the Mets, if they play the Phillies, I don't think it's going to matter. I think that the Padres are going to win. So Dodgers beat the Padres, Braves beat the Cardinals, Rays win the wild card game over the Twins, and then the Yankees beat them, and then the Athletics beat the White Sox. That would be the only upset of that round. And so in the LCS, the Dodgers beat the Braves, the Yankees beat the A's, and in the World Series, the Dodgers beat the Yankees. And I'm sticking with this prediction because I've been predicting a Yankees-Dodgers World Series for at least 3 years now, and it hasn't happened yet. But I feel like, it's going to be very similar to what we saw in the sports world last season, where we had 2 cities dominating all the sports. Last year was Los Angeles and Tampa. This year I think it's going to be New York and Los Angeles. These leagues, I don't want to say that they're rigging anything. I don't want to say that the MLB or the NBA or anybody is rigging this to happen. I mean, the NFL is rigging their games for results. They obviously want Tom Brady to, be the GOAT of the sport, so that way they can drive in more revenue by saying, this is the greatest player of all time. A lot of them are losing revenue. I think a lot of them are hoping for a New York LA World Series and NBA Finals as well. Just because that's their only way really to drive in revenue right now is by getting the biggest markets to compete for championships. So that's why I think this will be the year for New York LA World Series. I also think it's going to be the Nets and the Clippers in the finals. I think that, NHL, obviously no. Maybe the Islanders, but not the Kings, not the Ducks. Maybe the Islanders. I don't know. They might also have a Boston versus. Well, it kind of depends. I don't know how that's going to line up right now because, the bracket is kind of up for grabs. There's no like East versus West this time. The MLS, I don't really care. The NFL, I guess we'll see. I mean, the Giants and Jets are not going to get anywhere. The Rams might. The Chargers probably won't. But I think we might have New York versus LA, at least in basketball, and at least in baseball this year. Now on to the greatest topic of all time. The Philadelphia Eagles, what the hell is going on? That's all I wrote. What the hell is going on? Or at least that's all I wrote for the header. So for those who are unaware, the Eagles made the trade of trades earlier today. They traded down from the number 6 overall pick to the number 12 pick in exchange for that 12 pick and then a first next year. And, a lot of people on Twitter and social media in general are saying that this is a good trade. They need more picks. They're a rebuilding team. Yes, that is true. But the Dolphins will be good next year. And so this first round pick, it might as well be like an early second. They're not going to, the first rounder is going to be late either way. And if they make the playoffs and they make a playoff run, then that pick basically becomes a second round pick. Out of all the moves the Eagles have made the past 2 years, this might be one of the worst. And I'll tell you why. Not only did they trade down when they could have had Jamar Chase, but what they wanted to do was they wanted originally to get the number 3 pick. So first of all, you're going down from the number 3 pick to the number 12 pick just by virtue of expecting that number 3 pick, which wound up going to the 49ers in return. But do you know why Howie Roseman wanted the number 3 pick in the draft? Do you know who he wanted to draft? He wanted to draft Zach Wilson, the QB. He already doesn't have confidence in Hurts. And yet he was the one that traded Wentz away. So what's the idea? You just brought in Flacco. He's going to be the backup. I thought the idea... This is... I don't know what Howie's mindset is. Because you have Jalen Hurts, right? Actually, you know what? Let's go back farther than that. You have Carson Wentz. Let's say that after the season ended. The expectation... I think a lot of Eagles fans were talking about Wentz being traded, but what the organization itself was saying was that Wentz wouldn't be traded. Wentz was going to stay. And they brought in Nick Sirianni, who was the coach under Frank Reich, because they thought that Sirianni would be able to get Wentz back to form. This past year he had a really bad season. Before that, I don't think they should have traded Wentz. He had one bad season. He'd been great before that. It's not his fault they don't have an O-line. But the message from the organization was that, okay, we're keeping Wentz. Nick Sirianni is going to teach him. He's going to coach him. He'll be back to where he was before. I don't know why they chose Sirianni over Bieniemy or even Josh McDaniels, but I'm just saying what the organization was saying, what they thought, what they wanted. And then the message was that, oh yeah, we're trading Wentz. All of a sudden, we're trading Wentz. So we brought in Nick Sirianni to coach up Wentz, get him back to form, and now Wentz is going. And he wound up going to Indianapolis, which is funny because we basically traded one of their coaches for our QB. Colts definitely got the better end of that deal. Are you kidding me? I mean, they got the only piece that they were missing in a QB. And Wentz is going to be good next year. Because you know who Wentz worked for when they won the Super Bowl? He worked for Frank Reich. Now he's working for Frank Reich again. So anybody that says, oh yeah, Wentz sucks, he's going to be a bust, he's not going to do well next year. No, you are completely wrong. So they trade Wentz, and now Hurts is a number 1 guy. And so we're rallying around Jalen Hurts. And then all of a sudden, today we find out that Howie Roseman wants Zach Wilson. They brought in Joe Flacco, like I said, to coach up Hurts, to, kind of give him a little bit of guidance in addition to Sirianni. Hurts was going to have all these guys at his disposal to talk to, and he was going to be QB1, and Flacco was going to back him up if he needed to. And then all of a sudden, now the Eagles are interested in Zach Wilson. Now Hurts isn't their QB going forward. They don't have confidence in them. What is the message? What are you doing? What are you doing? What is the path back to the playoffs? You are a rebuilding team. People that say, and this, I have to admit, I like the trade a little bit because I'm glad that they got another first round pick. I don't like that it's a late first round pick, but I think that it's a good idea if you're drafting down to get another first rounder in return. When I originally saw this, I was angry because I thought it was a second rounder. It's not a second rounder, it's a first rounder at least. But you can tell that Howie does not have any idea what he's doing. You can't mess up. I think if you're an Eagles fan right now, you have to be concerned because you can't mess up drafting at number 6 unless you're David Gettleman and the New York Giants. But you can't mess up at number 6 because you're going to get somebody that's good either way. Number 12, there's a lot more room to mess up. I don't know who they're going to get with a number 12 pick. I don't really care about the NFL too much. And, the draft and all that. I mean, whatever. Yeah, I like watching live sports more than all the business decisions and stuff like that. Except for, trade deadline days. But the fact that you were willing to put Jalen Hurts down to QB2 after the message from the organization the past month since they traded Wentz has been... Hurts is QB1. And now all of a sudden he's not. Now all of a sudden we're going after another QB. Who are we going to draft? Mac Jones? What's the idea, Howie? What way are we going? We're not a wide receiver away from winning a Super Bowl. We're just not. It's going to take a lot more than that. We need an O-line, first of all. We need a better defense. We're getting better defense now. We're getting a better secondary. And so, that's good there. We need better coaching, first of all. I think a lot of Eagles fans that think that we're a wide receiver away, and if we get a wide receiver and he's good next year, they're going to be massively disappointed when we go 6-10 because Nick Sirianni has never called a play in his professional coaching life. What's the idea? What are we doing? Are we rebuilding? Are we going to the Super Bowl? What's the idea? Who are we drafting? What is the course of action? I mean, even in his worst days, you at least got the impression that Sam Hinkie knew what he was doing. And he wound up, that wound up being really successful, actually, for the Sixers, because they wound up getting Embiid and Simmons because of Sam Hinkie. I would say that Howie Roseman, without a doubt, is the worst general manager in recent Philly sports history. At least he's the worst of all the GMs right now. Matt Klentak, Chuck Fletcher, they don't even compare. I mean, we get pressed about Chuck Fletcher because he's not making any moves when we could have Matthias Ekholm, or we could be tanking right now, or we could have Forsberg, or we could be shipping off Gostisbehere and everybody with a number and a name on the back of their jersey over to every other team in the league. The problem with Howie Roseman is he has no idea what he's doing, and it's so obvious. It's so obvious. He has no idea what course of action he should be taking and how to improve this team going forward. He doesn't know what a rebuild is. He doesn't know what a contention is, or what contention for a championship is. He has literally no idea what he is doing right now. And so, the next time you're ranting about Chuck Fletcher or Matt Klentak or whatever the Ernst Tanner, the Union guy. I mean, Ernst Tanner has been really good, though. It was the guy before him that was just ridiculous. But, we need to stop. We need to be lighter on these guys. On Clentac, on Fletcher, on all the other GMs. On Morey especially. Because Roseman, Howie has no idea what he's doing. It's just as simple as that. He just doesn't know what he's doing. It's at this point, it's not even going to be worth watching this team next season. They're going to be the worst team in the league, without a doubt. No matter who they get in the draft, they're going to be the worst team in the league. Jalen Hurts could wind up throwing for like 5,000 yards. They'd still go 6-10. Because they don't really have a run game. They don't really have an O-line. Throw 5,000 yards and like 40 interceptions. Because you can't run and you don't have an O-line. Anyway. It's sad. Philly sports are sad at the moment. At least the things that I talk about with the championships, like who I think has the best chance at the championship of the next year. I think you can kind of start splitting this down a little bit more, or like making like a tier list of teams with chances to win a championship. You've got your teams that have a chance, your teams that maybe have a chance, and your teams that don't have a chance at all. And then the Eagles. The Eagles are below the teams that don't have a chance at all. Tier 1, Sixers. Tier 2, Union and Phillies. Tier 3, Flyers. Tier 4, Eagles. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean it's either the Sixers are going to win the NBA Finals or Philly isn't going to win a championship for at least 24 months, I guess. But anyway, that's going to be it for this episode. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you want to follow me on social media, it is at fairweatherfan, PHAN. The website is fairweatherfan.weebly.com. There's nothing on tonight. I mean, the Sixers and Flyers aren't playing. There's the away spring training games aren't being broadcast this year locally for whatever reason. I don't know why even the Phillies just can't get the feed from the Blue Jays and then add their own announcers over it. They I don't get it. I don't know. But there's no Phillies on tonight unless you have MLB TV. But I don't. So I need to find something to do tonight, I guess. Anyway, thank you guys so much for listening, and I will see you next time.